Hey folks, I know that Tesla price action has been pretty crazy and I just wanted to make a quick technical overview video on this. So right now I am on the 10-year one-day chart, as you guys can see. So if you're looking right here, we're below the 200-day moving average. We're below the 50-day moving average. We're below this longer term trend line, as you guys can see. And we're below the most significant near-term resistance, which is right at 207.17. We're above this 166.30 support. So let's just talk about this a little bit. So first, let's talk about this 207.17 resistance level. Why is it significant? Well, back here, we made this double bottom. So it was acting as prior support. It also bounced off this longer-term trend line right here. So we made this double bottom, we made this massive rip, and even back here, we were chopping around this level. So once we broke this level, it's now acting as resistance. So prior support can act as future resistance when we break underneath it. And if you take a look at this longer term trend line right here, we were basically chopping around right here. We were staying underneath it. It was resistance. Once we broke out, we saw this huge rally, and then now we come back, we test it, we make this double bottom, we rip again, we fade underneath it, but look right here, we go back and we hit it one more time, and then we reject. So this longer term trend line is pretty darn important. Now, let's talk about the support. So if we're looking at the support, it's right at 166.30. So this corresponds with this previous high right there. So it rejected right there. And you guys can see once we broke past that area, we saw this massive rally. So this area right here, this was right around the end of August in 2020. So that was very, very close to the Tesla stock split, I believe. So prior resistance can act as future support. So here we have this prior resistance acting as future support all the way back here. So now let's just zoom in to more recent action right here. All right, so let's talk about this. So we're in this falling wedge pattern. So falling wedge is basically you have a bottom support line, you have a top resistance line, and they're kind of converging to this point. So it's making this wedge. So as you guys can see, we're chopping back and forth between this, support, resistance, support, resistance, support, resistance. And you guys can see most recently we broke out of this. But look what happened. I mean, we're going almost right back into this. So is this a false breakout? If this is a false breakout of this wedge, it's very, very bearish. But what could also happen is we could go back. We could back test this top trend line and then we could rip. So it's very hard to tell what exactly is going to happen. But we can make a few assumptions. So let's just go to the 30-day, 30-minute chart. Now let me just zoom in a little bit. Now let's just talk about the bullish scenario. So bullish scenario is two possible things. So we go down here, we make this left shoulder, we make this head right here, and then we make a right shoulder, we make this inverse head and shoulders pattern, and then we do this massive rip. Or we continue falling, we make a double bottom right here, and then we rally off of that. So that is the more bullish scenario. Now, let's talk about a more bearish scenario. So the bearish scenario is, hey, you know what? We have this double top right here, and we have this gap to the downside. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to fill that gap. And, if we want to be more bearish, we're going to break this prior support right here, and we're going to go below that. We're going to fall right back into the wedge. So that would be the bearish situation. Now, let's just talk about a few things. Let's talk about this upwards gap that we recently made. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit right there. So this literally happened like, I believe it was yesterday. So let's just go ahead. Let's draw it out right here. All right. Let's make it tan. So there we go. There is that gap. So if we're looking at this gap, the bottom of this gap is right around 191.30. The top of this gap, if we want to fill it, it's going to be right around 193.66. So there's that top gap. Now, let's just go ahead and talk about the bottom gap. So as you guys can see, there's this gap right down there. That bottom gap fills right around 170. So let's just zoom in a little bit more so you guys can see this a little more clear. All right. So if we're looking at the top of this gap is right around 172.42. So 172.42 to 170 is where this gap lies. Now let's just zoom out a little bit one more time. So here's the situation. I mean, it's not a good situation to be in. So right now, you guys can see, right now we're in intraday. So it's about 1 hour, 30 minutes after opening. So there's this situation where we could get right back into this yellow box right here. So this yellow box represents a chop zone. So as you guys can see, we were chopping right down here. When we broke this yellow box, we had this massive sell-off. And then when we entered this yellow box again, we chopped around a little bit. We had a false breakout right there. And then here's the real breakout when we clearly broke out of this yellow box and we stayed above it for a few days. But then now, now we're getting tricked again. Hey, you know what? Never mind. We're going right back into the yellow box. And instead, we're going to go right back underneath it. So it's not a good situation to be underneath this chop zone, because then, the longer we stay underneath this chop zone, the more likely it is that we could fill this downside gap right here at 170. So right now, we're literally in the crossroads. So we could either go back and fill this gap, or we could go and we could fill this gap. But right now, there is a little bit more of a bearish emphasis because, like I said, we're underneath this chop zone right here. So notice that intraday price action is trying to get back into it. So we'll see if we actually get back into it by the end of today. But it is a very likely scenario. Now let me talk about this blue line right here. So what is this blue line? So I have this blue line drawn right at 183.12. So this is actually the lower implied moves as told by the options market. So how do I find this data? So the way that I find this data is on Thinkorswim. I'm going to go on Analyze. And then I'm going to think back to a prior date in the last week. So at the end of last week was on December 2nd. So I'm going to go over to December 3rd. And then I'm going to look at the options pricing for the at the money strikes. So if we're looking at the options for the next week, which is 1 week after December 2nd, that would be December 9th. So if I'm looking at December 9th, the price action right now is at 194.86 as of December 3rd. So we're going to the December 9th option strikes. And we're looking at the at the money, which is right around the 195. So right here, we see a implied move of $11.74. So here's how you calculate this. You get the close on December 2nd, which was the prior Friday. That's 194.86. And then you subtract the implied move. So notice that there's a plus or minus there. So there you go, 183.12. That's the lower implied move as told by the options market. Now what is the higher implied move? Well, the higher is basically just adding it. So 194.86. Oops. And then we're going to add that $11.74. So that gives us 206.60. That is the top of the implied move, so the higher end. So then now we go back to our charts. And then, hey, does this really make sense? Well, you know what? It kind of does, because this is basically a line drawn right around this chop zone right here. So the options market was essentially expecting that the lower end will be right around this chop zone right here where we have a little bit of support, as you guys can see. But as you guys can see, we also cut well below this. So, right now we're heavily oversold because we're well below this lower implied move. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll definitely leave additional links just talking more about the implied move. I will also leave a link down below talking about the areas where Elon Musk sold. So hope you guys enjoyed the video and have a great one.